Mr. Raja, Mr. Mathur, Mr. Bajaj, Mr. Verma, and other dear friends from the energy community. I'm very happy to be here this morning. I normally live in a out-of-the-way place in Ooty, and so I have more limited occasions to interact with all the experts like you than I would have done if I lived in Bombay or Delhi. But one advantage it confers is that in between such occasions, I have a lot of time to reflect and kind of look at things in a historical perspective. So in my keynote talk on these energy issues, I shall do a little bit of historical introspection. And I'm sure this is not anything new to you, but it will only help us to see how quite often many of the problems keep recurring, that we have applied our mind to find solution to these problems, but we have failed to find the solution of the right effectiveness, and therefore the problem continues to be with us, maybe in an attenuated form, but nevertheless still continues to be addressed and solved. So in that spirit, for instance, one occasion there was a report of the National Sample Survey Office. It was a report in August 2015. So that report talked about the rural energy, household energy requirements, and it was really quite staggering. And the report's findings were 2/3 of the rural households continue to rely on firewood for cooking. 2/3 of the urban households, of course, use LPG for cooking. 14% of urban households, including half the poorest, roughly 20% that is, still rely on firewood. Use of LPG in rural households has gone up from 2% 2 decades ago to 15% in 2011-12. In North Indian states, cow dung cake is a major fuel for cooking in 1/3 of the households in UP and Punjab, and 1/4 of the households in Haryana, and 1/5 of the households in Bihar. 1/4 of the rural households still rely on kerosene for lighting. Rural households in Andhra Pradesh, Punjab, Tamil Nadu and Kerala use electricity for lighting, but in UP only 40% of the rural households have electricity. Why I'm starting out with this problem is that, of course, when you look at the energy sector, quite often we talk of electricity, we talk about commercial electricity for industry, organized business and so on, and urban use. But we are really not looking at the broader energy picture. Now I'm quite sure that 100 or 200 years ago in North India, the women were certainly not using cow dung cake for energy. I think it's not that they wanted to use it, but I think after deforestation took place in the entire Indo-Gangetic plain, they were compelled to use what was available, which is cow dung cake. Now, it is, of course, old wisdom that cow dung should be used as a fertilizer, but it is not. And now we are having in Punjab, Haryana, everywhere, soil nutrition has come down a great deal simply because that cow dung is not going back into the soil. Now, when I read this thing, I was reminded of the presidential address that Dr. Bhabha gave in 1955 to the first United Nations conference on the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Now, that was held in 1955. In 1953, Eisenhower announced the Atoms for Peace and so on. And so, with that kind of initiative, people began to declassify information and knowledge in nuclear matters. And there was the first conference. Dr. Bhabha was chosen as the president because he didn't represent the East or the Western blocs, and so he was neutral. So they made him president. And in that study, in that presidential address, and also a paper he gave to that conference, he brought out the energy dilemmas of India. So at that time, he had said that the so-called non-commercial energy sources, firewood and cow dung, contributed 70% or so of the energy budget of that point of time. Okay, now, if you were to take a look today at the cumulative use of firewood and cow dung, actually it has not gone down from that time, it actually increased. I think we were burning some over 200 million tons of wood every year, and I do not know the tonnage of the cow dung we are burning. So, and then we all know that it is not something we should be doing. We should use cow dung in a more sensible manner, produce methane, and return the nutrient value to the soil and all that. But it has not happened. There was a period of time when we talked about gobar gas and Khadi village industries and so on, giving money, subsidies and that, but no gobar gas revolution took place in this country. So we're continuing this irrational burning of valuable nutrient to the soil and denying rural households a better form of energy. I mean, all through smoke and pollutants and so on, affecting the health of the rural women folk, it continues unabated. So that's first issue. Now the other issue, another conclusion we can reach is that in the last 1955 to now, that is 45 plus 15, 60 years, all the commercial energy that we are using, and there's a big increase that has taken place, actually has gone to address the problems of the urban communities, of the industries, of the infrastructure like railways and so on, and the domestic use in cities and so forth. In other words, that section of the rural population which is denied commercial energy inputs continues to be denied commercial energy inputs, and therefore another way of looking at it is that since we all recognize that energy input is also related directly to quality of life, to Human Development Index, to GDP or per capita income, all those things, so they will remain low. In a broad sense, that's what emerges. So this issue still continues, and then there is really no great change that has taken place. Now, of course, our major commercial sources are coal and petroleum. Now, coal, for a long time we always thought, I mean, I'm talking now as a member of the Planning Commission many years ago, at any cost don't import fuel, even if you import capital equipment, because fuel will be continuing import, you'll be depending continuously on importations you can't afford because of your foreign exchange problem, etc. etc. So we always said, 60 years we've been saying, we must be self-reliant energy. What's the situation today? We are consuming 800 million tons of coal, recent information. 600 million tons came from Indian sources. Incidentally, my numbers are all broad ballpark numbers. It is not to do with third place of place at all, maybe second, maybe sometimes only first place. So 600 million tons is broadly 500 million tons of Coal India, another 100 million tons by the Singareni, some captive mines and all that. And recent information, 200 million tons have been imported this last financial year. So 800 million tons, of which 200 million are imported, and we are seeing a rapidly increasing import picture in the coal sector also. Because Indian coal production, if it has to increase, it will necessarily have to go and work on the currently forested areas of the country. Much of the coal in India is all open cast mining. There used to be a small amount, in the early days was deep mining is now practically zero, I don't say zero, but very little. And in the future, coal mining now will also be open cast mining. So I think the question is, are you going to lose all the remaining forests? It's going to be possible or not. This issue will continue to be with us. Then petroleum, we reached almost 70% self-sufficiency in 1980, 80-85 period, Bombay High, Ankleshwar and all these things. But now we are about 80% import, and probably in another some period of time we will 90% import also. Now gas. Well, it's a bit of a disappointment because at one time we all thought there was a great amount of gas coming from Krishna Godavari basin. That hasn't happened. There were serious problems in keeping the gas-fired power stations going. You all know that last year's crisis. And then there was a period of time, I think Mr. Bajaj will probably remember that, Vijay Kelkar at one time said, look, let us put naphtha, whole lot of naphtha-based power stations. Fortunately, we didn't build them at the time because by the time they would have been built, naphtha prices shot up. and the one naphtha fire station in Kerala never operated in the Kaimpuram. Only fitfully it has been operating. Fortunately, we didn't get into that. But then, our reactions to any problem are so slow and so delayed that by the time our implementation takes place, that problem would have disappeared or some new problem would have come altogether. In NAFTA was a case like that. For instance, I remember talking to, I think some of you know, Satish Chandran, who was Energy Secretary at one time, and then Prime Minister Secretary with Devagowda and Gujarat. And what happened is, at one point of time, people thought of this naphtha-based power station as floating power station to give relief to the coastal areas, some emergency type of power. And suddenly everybody wanted to put it. And then suddenly we found some 15 gigawatts of naphtha-based projects came about. In one case in Bidadi, I remember, initially planned for gas, then they said it should go into naphtha. They found the investments involved were so huge to be able to bring all the naphtha on tankers and railway line and all that. Unfortunately, that found uneconomic and we dropped. Never got built. So this kind of crazy situation goes on. And then LNG. We missed out when we could have. All the LNG that was available in Indonesia and Malaysia was available in the 90s, 80s and 90s. At that time, the Japanese, the Thailand people, they got long-term contracts. I remember much of the modern units in Thailand are all gas-based, and they have long-term contracts with Malaysia and Indonesian gas supply at very affordable prices. And when we wake up, we end up with $10 per million BTU, $12 per million BTU, $15 per million BTU. So a completely crazy situation. So no quick reaction ever takes place in our country. And then we finally, the same thing happened even in the question of acquiring petroleum assets around the world, gas assets around the world, uranium assets. For instance, in the case of uranium assets, I want to tell you, we've been talking from 2008, 9, you'll remember. We all said, yes, we must go and get assets. Zero. And in gas assets, a little bit, gas and oil assets. So, though our, shall we say, external payments position has improved a great deal over a period of time and all that, we still don't have that quickness in taking action in the global markets to get national advantage of the prevailing circumstances. For instance, fortunately, because uranium has now come down, we're buying some from around the world. But invariably what happens is by the time we react, that situation that favorable to us would have disappeared, and then another unfavorable situation would develop. So now, then of course, in the power sector, we have a long story. 60 years of shortages of power. There's not a single year, I'm now 85 years, and not a single year I've heard when there is no, suppressed demand, power interruptions, and cutting off supply. Bangalore, I've been reading, I'm going there the next couple of days, 8-10 hours of power cut now. And this is not even the start of the dry season, because the hydros this time have not filled up at all. And that's the situation in Bangalore. Supposed to be our main Silicon Valley, we keep talking, main generator for our income, and that we can't provide. Everybody is running diesel sets, producing power about 20 rupees a kilowatt hour. It's a crazy situation, really. So now, expansion of power sector, of course, last year has been, the last 2 years have done better. But then we again find all these problems of inability to transfer surplus power from one area where it is available to the other area where it is deficit, inadequate investments in transmission and distribution is a chronic problem. Every five-year plan you read, it's always been saying underinvestment in transmission and distribution. So it's going on endlessly. Now, of course, Raja referred to the electric sector reforms, and I do not know, I think really a group like this will have to apply critically its mind to find out whether the intended benefits actually have come out of the 2003 reforms, and if there are conceptual problems, socio-economic problems, we must identify them. Because many a time, many of our reform agenda has been dictated either by outside brains or outside institutions. I mean, for instance, World Bank, some other outfit like that, they are used to a different set of circumstances. And quite often, many of these whiz kids these days are used to American derived knowledge. And they are all based on the situation they're obtaining there. Historic growth of the US has been such, has been driven by the private sector. And therefore they're quite happy, and they think that large privately owned utilities will save them, and even that is to be really established. But there it is. At least they have been providing enormous amount of power and energy and so on. But our historical development is completely different. It's a state-run, state-managed, state-invested sector. And now, how to marry so-called market-driven concepts into a situation which is highly driven by state planning? I think we haven't actually understood the dynamics of the Indian socio-economic structure. Otherwise, you would never have this mismatch of, I think I'm quoting from the wisdom of Bajaj and others, every kilowatt hour of electricity sold in this country is associated with 1 rupee loss. 3.5 rupees you spend it to produce, 2.5 rupees you collect it, if at all. And so, as you produce more, you've got to have more subsidy. It goes on endlessly. Now, sometimes we tend to think that subsidy itself is a bad word. I do not know. But look at it that if a kilowatt hour of electricity is producing so much good to the country, then subsidy can be looked upon as an inevitable tax element. Only thing is this, that not everybody in the country is using electricity, and therefore you may say that there is an unfair sharing of the subsidy burden in societal terms. But the other issues were there, unfortunately, large public sector behemoths, overstaffing, high labor welfare costs, lack of accountability, corruption, political interference, unsatisfactory service to the public, all of these things. So, we've been hoping. Now, it is another issue that needs to be examined. We started giving an emphasis on private sector generation in this country, again roughly around 2000. What's happened in 15 years? There should be a critical examination and a professional study, and again not necessarily to prove or disprove a given viewpoint, but rather to see what are the on-the-ground situation with regard to benefits and the shortcomings. I'm not so sure that we do this kind of critical analysis. I don't know, maybe Mr. Raja told me about this particular institution, and people like this, you've got a great deal of expertise. You've got to look into this and see whether mid-course corrections will have to be made. Of course, Raja referred to the Electricity Act modifications. I do not know how widely it has been. It's been disseminated certainly, but whether the inputs that have gone in from the professionals have reflected themselves or not is something that's to be seen. Now, renewable energy. Certainly, it is something that been recognized that we should be doing more. Of course, if you are to ask all our friends from Germany and other places, they'll all say, yes, of course, you must do more. In fact, the German minister came to India and he said, no, don't do anything about nuclear, you should only be thinking of the renewable. But the problem is that all those societies, they have already built their infrastructure based on fossil energy. And it is the creation of infrastructure is energy intensive. It requires uninterrupted power. You can't run electric railway systems, you can't run steel plants, you can't run manufacturing industries on solar and wind. A point that Raja already made. Interruptible power is different from base load power. And yet everybody will give us advice. So if we're going to create our infrastructure, and we're talking of the Japanese recently have said they're going to be keen on building a Shinkansen, that is a fast train from Ahmedabad to Bombay. And they're prepared to give a loan at 1% rate of interest. It's really a giveaway. So probably it will be built. And that kind of thing, you can't sustain renewable energy. You can put any number of solar photovoltaic collectors, wind and all that, but you require something different. So there is another perspective that is required. and that is that 125 gigawatts of renewable energy has been announced for some particular date. I think how much subsidies will be involved there? Somebody will have to calculate, because so far the solar and wind energy programs have been driven by subsidies. So we should not have another situation with a huge subsidy on account of this rapid induction of renewable energy. Of course, it's true that earlier held views on costs of solar and wind have come down, no doubt about that. But I don't believe real costs have come down in that way, that they are now driven purely on market principles. There is still an enormous amount of subsidy that's going to be there. Of course, one thing good, if you were to visit Kudankulam, which is where our large reactors are located, that particular area, I'm amazed every time I go there are more and more wind energy generators, because it's one of the best sites for wind energy. That particular location at the tip of India, enormous amount of wind is there, and so that's a good thing that's happening. And I think recently somebody has announced in India that they are going to think in terms of offshore wind energy, because the Germans have for some period of time got 5 megawatt turbines and groups of something like 16 to 80 megawatts on a platform offshore, and maybe such installations should be considered. They're also associated with quite high costs, because offshore structures which are to withstand high wind and wave forces and so on are really quite expensive. Now, of course, on nuclear, tomorrow I'm glad to the discussion, but I would really like to say the following. It's a case where a great deal has been done in the country, but great promises not fulfilled. So this is a very, I have to admit it quite frankly, because we haven't been the first country in Asia. We have ahead of Japan, we are ahead of China, ahead of Korea. 1969 is when we first started our nuclear power station in Tarapur. After that, we have struggled and built a number of stations, but we have yet not crossed 10,000 megawatts. It's completely disappointing. I remember Dr. Sarabhai, when he used to be alive, he had said 10,000 megawatts by the year 2000. We are not going to see 10,000 megawatts of nuclear power even by 2020. Imagine that. We'll only reach that number in 2022 or something like that. Very, shall we say, a case where high hopes were placed but not realized. I guess the reasons are there, many reasons are there. All of that, I'm sure you all know, technology denial and lack of uranium, all of those factors are there. But even then, in 2008, there was this 3 years of dialogue between India and the United States, in which I was also an important participant from outside the governmental system. And then we had this agreement. And we thought, we're going ahead with number of 1,000, 1,500 megawatt units. Not a single project has taken off, excepting the 2 additional units at Kudankulam. And Kudankulam agreement was negotiated in my time. When I was chairman, I signed in this town, in this city in Delhi, as a witness when Rajiv Gandhi as Prime Minister and Gorbachev as President of the USSR signed that agreement in November 1988, and for 2 reactors at the time. And they are the only 2 reactors that we still have. And of course, fortunately, 2 more have been agreed. But this is not the way we must go about it. Why only 2? You must have 10 reactors, you must have 12 reactors of that kind at one time. Same thing, we have a 700 megawatt heavy water reactor, which is under construction, 2 of them in Kakrapara and 2 in Rajasthan. I was there in Rajasthan recently. They're coming up quite nicely, really. Our reactors are associated with the lowest cost at the present time. These 700 megawatt reactors have an investment cost of 15 crores per megawatt. And they will give power at 6.5 rupees per kilowatt hour. Now, the two additional, well, incidentally, the two Russian reactors, 1000 megawatt, a little less than 4 rupees per kilowatt hour. Our existing fleet of the small and medium heavy water reactors and also Tarapur, they are all put together, their average cost is about 2.5 rupees per kilowatt, little less. In fact, the old Tarapur reactor is producing and selling power at 1 rupee per kilowatt hour. So imagine. It was originally considered to have a life of 25 years. It has done 40 years, 40 plus, but I think maybe probably should finish it off at 50 years. I don't think we should go on much longer. Maybe 2019, and I think we should now retire that. But what it goes to show is that once you design and build a reactor properly, they can continue to operate for a long time, and that's really the big advantage. You get power which is protected from inflationary forces for a long haul period, and that we've seen. But then it is too small a quantum in the context of the country. I mean, we with 250,000 megawatts in the country, with our nuclear capacity of 8,000 megawatts, this is really chicken feed. So it's not good enough. And the big expansion didn't take place. And even when we got our own technology and our own design, our own manufacturing capability available, we are only going 2 reactors at a time. There is no way of building things, you see. Other people have successfully built reactors. For instance, France in the 1980s, what did they do? Or 70s? Each order tranche, 12 reactors, 16 reactors, you know. That's the kind of jumps you've got to take. At a time you commit to 12,000 megawatts, 15,000 megawatts, 20,000 megawatts. We could have done that, but of course, then it involves a totally different way of looking at the situation of finances. For instance, many people don't realize that the French, when they went ahead in a big way to grow in nuclear energy, it was not the French money that went in to grow their program. It was actually the American money market that financed it, because what happened is EDF, which had, of course, been a national monopoly and had been running its hydro and coal business rather well and had a good balance sheet, they were able to get from the American money market money to fund the large pressurized water reactor program. So, but then, you know, can India do that? Well, in theory, yes, but in practice, well, I don't know. So, now, this is the other issue. Now, Raja referred to this intended nationally, what is the other word? Determined contribution. Of course, we have recently announced that we are going to do some 35%, and relative to 2005, I think, by 2025, I think. Yeah. So, of course, it's also true that certainly our organized industry in some of the sectors is doing extremely well in energy efficiency, there is no doubt. But I think there is a big issue of energy efficiency in a whole lot of other areas, small, medium sectors. You know, all these little furnaces and little smelting activities, all those things I think are thoroughly inefficient and they require big technology upgradation. So here I think the whole problem is we seem to be very happy as with our own social attitudes to coexist between 2015 and 1850, because we are quite happy if a small segment is up to date and 2010, 2015 generation, but that a large section of our industry, of our society is still at 1850, 1900. So we don't seem to want, our society doesn't seem to have any osmotic forces strong enough to see that the modernizing force really goes into those areas. I mean, there are all hidden areas of primitiveness that continue to be primitive. Normally you would think that osmotic forces will somehow drive the other way, but it is not happening at all. At the speed that it should happen. I think at the bottom of all this is a huge psychological problem in India. We have not yet convinced ourselves that we must come to grips with modern technology and modern way of living. There is a huge internal built-in feedback which says, no, maybe the old ways are still good. Otherwise, why would we have so many regressive things that are going on in our society? I mean, the last, not this year, but last year Science Congress, people talked about that India was already having supersonic aircraft and it had, I don't know, cell implant technology, transplant of head, and this and that, and whatnot. Why would people talk about that? So, and there are takers for all these things. There is no, in fact, somebody keeps saying, oh yes, in that particular Vimana Shastra there is some metal mentioned, and that is going to be able to make you build aircrafts that fly and all that. I mean, compare ourselves to the other parts of the Eastern societies. The way that our neighboring Mongoloid societies, especially Japan, China, Korea, Vietnam, they're able to come to terms with modern science and technology. We don't seem to be able to do that. So I think there's a huge attitudinal problem, and really you cannot progress unless you control the regressive elements. You know, I read somewhere in a book which maybe some of you know. There is a very famous book and film and all that. Don't Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee. The same author, the second book has come, which is of course considered to be completely different from the first book. But in one particular phrase, one sentence only, the author says, is very important to remember. That says, when prejudice and faith come in, reason goes out. In one sentence, it captures the mood of human personality. You bring in prejudice, you bring in faith, and reason goes out. So that's really problem. I think I would say that much of our problems in this country is the fact that we are trapped with both prejudice and faith. And we haven't really tried to move out of that and then get on with the modern days. Now, I just will now, since I do not want to talk on abstract issues, you know, some action points on the energy issue. I thought I would just draw. Again, these are not words of wisdom that you have all not been aware of. But I thought I'd summarize that, which I put down here. First, do not burn cow dung as fuel. Build large number of biogas or biomethanation plants, return the nutrients to soil, and produce gas for cooking. Maybe we can engage the milk cooperative organizations, dairy companies and all that in bringing about this kind of biomethanation activity and see that the soil enrichment takes place and it doesn't deplete further. Shift rural domestic fuel from firewood and dung cake to gobar gas, coke briquettes, kerosene and LPG. All new coal-fired power plants to use supercritical and ultra-supercritical boilers to get higher efficiency. Follow developments in the coal gasification combined cycle designs to achieve still higher efficiency. Because we will continue to build coal-fired stations in this country for some period of time. Replacement of all lighting systems to LED, motor efficiency improvements across all users. Implement mass transport systems in all cities, encourage electric cars and buses, especially in urban areas. Present-day motor cars are more efficient than earlier designs, but I think revolutionary designs using materials and structures as used in space vehicles could give much higher fuel efficiency. Develop lower cost, higher efficiency solar photovoltaics and wind generators. Pursue energy savings across the entire chain of electricity production, transmission and distribution using new technologies derived from the IT industry. Pursue actively the nuclear option of the first, second and third stages. I didn't go into the detail, we'll do it tomorrow, with highest emphasis on Indian design, Indian manufacturing and Indian technology. The reason I'm mentioning this is, for the last few years there has been a discussion whether we should import these large reactors from France or United States. But of course tomorrow the Nuclear Power Corporation's Director of Finance is speaking. I think I had recently been in the US for some discussions and costs and so on. My own feeling is that both the French and American reactors, as of now, appear to be far too expensive. I mentioned a number of 15 crores per megawatt for our reactors, but that will also go up with time. The Russian reactors 3 and 4 could have come 20 crores per megawatt. Compared to that, the numbers that we keep seeing in the international published literature indicate that the French and American reactors are likely to be costing 30 to 40 crores per megawatt, or sometimes even more. So this is an issue that's going to come head on. And although we had hoped in the last few years that we would have big reactors in these two countries, my own personal feeling is that we should build many of our own heavy water reactors, more Russian-derived reactors, and then design and build our own light water reactor of 900 megawatts. We've got a design ready, it's on the drawing board, because we've got experience from submarine reactors, we've got experience from heavy water reactors. So instead of going overseas anymore, just build on our own. In fact, we are also going to be building some more fast reactors and so on. So, but that requires a massive, program of ordering something like 20, 30 reactors in one long-term program with interim benchmarks and so on. Then intensify search for hydrocarbons on land and offshore. Acquire assets abroad, lay down pipelines overland or offshore to source from friendly countries, and also acquire overseas coal and uranium assets wherever feasible. To develop designs for practical solar cookers, because present day designs are okay for rice, dal and vegetables, but making rotis is a real problem. So one possible idea you could pursue is maybe a photovoltaic solar electric generator, small size one, coupled with some induction heating, which might be feasible with some amount of research, etc. We must then pursue basic research and production of hydrogen using solar energy, if possible. And then our own scientists and technologists must spread the message about relevance of their work for societal benefits. Opponents of any technological venture are experts at communication, and our science and technology personnel are very poor interlocutors. Very seldom can an engineer hold forth on the benefits and disadvantages of dam projects, hydroelectric projects. I want to give one example. I lived as a young fellow in a place called Mandya, which is between Bangalore and Mysore. And at that time, I think I was about 11 years old. And at that time, the Kaveri, the dam across the Kaveri called Krishna Sagar Dam, had been built some years before that, and they just laid down the irrigation canals. At that point of time, that area was still very barren, rocky, nothing grew there, and it was a bit of a poor place for agriculture and so on. That was in 1940-41 time. Now, you go there these days, of course it's now 60, 70 years, the entire place is so green that Mandya, Srinivasan and all those Madur and other areas, the richest agricultural areas. It takes 40, 50, 60 years for benefits of these schemes to manifest. In the meantime, Meda Patkars will go and then keep on saying, don't build dams, don't build canals, don't do this. And then that there is another lady who keeps saying, we don't want all this agriculture, only you don't use any technology, old ways are good and all that. They all forget, the old ways might have been good when India's population was about 200 million. It's not going to be good when the country's population is 1,300 million and so on. So it's a big problem. But then many of our technologies are terrible communicators. They're just unable to rationally discuss, dispel the myths, and present their views in a deeply rational way. Because quite often, people say, I'm an expert in the field, you take my view. No, that's not going to happen. You've got to be able to take the trouble to explore your ideas and convince people. Now, let's look at the energy picture per se on a long haul basis. At one point of time, some colleagues of mine in the atomic energy, I think you would know Bharadwaj, Grover, they, along with me, we wrote a paper in early 2002, 2003 time, At that time we speculated what would be the long-term needs of electricity, not of the electricity sector, not necessarily the entire energy sector. And so we said, oh well, I think we should look at 5,000 kilowatt hours per capita, and because I think global average of 2,500, and maybe 5,000 is the kind of thing you need. The US, Canada, about 15,000 kilowatt hours, and so on. So then you predicted population and so on, and then we ended up with a number. Oh well, by 2050 we would require perhaps 1,300 gigawatts of electricity, 1,350 or something like that. And then we did a speculative distribution of that, how much fossil, how much nuclear, and so on. So we then said, okay, maybe 500, 400, 500 fossil, 400, 500 nuclear, some 300, 400 renewable. Now, on relooking those numbers, now I believe that I think even a target of 5,000 kilowatt hours per capita may not be really necessary, because a great deal of improvement in efficiency is taking place in lighting, LEDs and so on. And then even industrial use of electricity is improved a great deal. So I said, well, let's not even keep a target of 2,500 kilowatt hours. Maybe we can improve it as we go along, but for the time being, let's look at it that way. Then we end up with a number more like 750, 800 gigawatts by 2052. So if you were to look at 800 gigawatts of electricity, and then you distribute that, I would speculate to say that maybe 275 gigawatts of that may be nuclear, maybe 275, 300 gigawatts may be fossil, and the balance could be renewable. But even that is enormous, big growth is required. Now, really speaking, if you have to meet this INDC, we really have to push the nuclear in a big way, remembering that the renewables will be intermittent, that they require a backup. Otherwise, there's no way they're going to be able to achieve it. And that's a big challenge. How are we going to do that? Of course, on the one hand, it may appear on the one hand, really, no, I don't think we'll be able to do that. But then, I happened to be only a few weeks ago at Hazira. Now there, the atomic energy, the nuclear power people and Larsen & Toubro, we built up an integrated forge shop for converting raw material into finished forgings required for making reactors, tube sheets and all that. The entire shop is about 1 or 2 kilometers long. You start with one end from pig iron, all the other stuff, scrap and all that you want to put. At the other end is a finished, the huge forging press and everything else, machine and so on. Then I visited the turbine shop. The forge shop is now empty, there is no job there. The turbine shop that Larsen & Toubro has built with Toshiba and Mitsubishi combined, huge shop. Some of the best shops I have seen. I have seen shops all over the world. For instance, the turbine shop is integral. Absolutely, there is no disc and no shaft and all that. It's an integrally machined thing. Top class machines for making all the furniture fixing, plate fixing and all that. Again, partially loaded. So we create in an isolated way some facility, a lot of money. After you put money into this thing, Larsen & Toubro and others, last year at the Atomic Energy Commission, our nuclear power people said, sir, the time has come to refer this forge facility to BIFR. Now what is this nonsense? You create national facilities and then you don't load them. This kind of policy which goes on will get nowhere. There are many areas we have to take a look. For instance, why should we be importing 50 gigawatts of thermal power from China? Very important. 90% of our telecom hardware is from China. Earlier on, you see, make in India, of course, people say it's nothing new. We're always saying that. That's true. But we didn't make in India. See, when the telecom revolution took off in the last 10 years, at that time people really didn't look at the matching manufacturing to meet the demands. And today you say, oh, it's not too late, they already have so much capacity, we can't compete, etc., etc. So, you know, we got to break this old habits of confused thinking. How that's going to happen is really is an open question. But I think groups like such as this should have to apply their mind. I think in every area must look at things in a very objective way. Do the past analysis not with a view to finding fault, but with a view to finding where things didn't go right, where our thinking was wrong, and where we need new thinking. This kind of thing is very just absent in every area, whether it is diplomacy, whether it is national economic policy. We do a lot of voodoo thinking, voodoo economics, voodoo energy planning, and so on. So I think that needs to be replaced. We require more professional thinking. I think that's probably what I'd like to say at this point of time. And I sincerely hope that you all have a very interesting 3-day conference. I think I can congratulate Raja. I must tell you one thing about Raja. It might be a little personal. You know, I went to a place called Tumlapalli in Andhra Pradesh. That not far from a place called that area. That Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, one Mr. Reddy, who died in the air crash, Rajshekar Reddy, there. And not far from his particular constituency, they opened a very large uranium mine. And when I went for that, and it requires effort, etc., so we started probing further. Then he went back to Bombay and somehow got hold of Kakodkar, who was the chairman, sat with him, and he was also skeptical. No, it's been seen, and it's not going to work, I'm not sure. Then I started thinking, and he started probing. You know, now that's one of our large uranium projects. Of course, there are problems there in that the recoveries from the alkaline leach route hasn't actually reached optimum levels, but they're going to reach there. But for a man who came from the administrative services to have taken that kind of critical interest and understanding, it gave me great hopes. Because quite a lot of other people from the central services, unfortunately, are very happy to give broad general lectures and so on and advise to everybody, and not apply their mind and try to find a solution. So I think Raja has done really a great job there. If you could do it there, I think he will do a good job there. Good luck.